One of my most favorite things to do as a child was visit my grandmother in her 1892 Victorian home in Alameda, California. She always had the best treats for my brother and I when we came. The house was on a narrow 1-acre plot filled with the most beautifully scented lilacs, and we'd always settle down in her parlor and look over the daguerreotype albums from my grandfather's travels around the world. She always showed us wonderful pictures and included a story when she remembered one. As my grandfather and grandmother are no longer on this earth, I'll tell my grandfather's story.
I was born in Kalingi-Nomel, Harnuma, Estonia in 1885. At that time, Estonia was enjoying a period of national consciousness. I was the youngest of 6 children born to Jack Jackson and Mary Sill. I never knew my older siblings very well because they were grown and leading their own lives by the time I could remember. I spent my early days playing with family and friends and learning the art of master cabinetry from my father. At 17, I attended school for a few years. Estonia was now under Russian rule, and the government was looking for young, sturdy recruits to fight against Japan in the Russo-Japanese War. I quickly decided this wasn't for me and spent the war years in a Russian Orthodox monastery near Tallinn. For 2 years, I led a life of contemplation and prayer. Way too much for a free spirit like myself. I took my savings and in 1906 left Estonia from Tallinn by hopping a cargo steamship bound for the port of Bremen in Germany. I worked in the steam room. During that trip, I realized how much I enjoyed working with mechanical things. More importantly, I saw a whole new world filled with different ideas and cultures. And so, my wanderlust was born. But after 2 months, I'd had enough of the area, drinking beer and dancing with beautiful Fräuleins. Auf Wiedersehen, Bremen. My next destination was to the Ivory Coast country of Ghana in Africa. Again, I worked in the engine room of a steamship. While there, I attended many celebrations and watched the harvesting of cocoa beans. The customs and ways of that culture made me uncomfortable. I met many tribal people with lip plugs and elongated necks brought about by gold coils. I also witnessed tribal conflicts. It was soon time to move on. In 1907, I worked on a steamship that passed through the Peihui River that leads to Beijing, China. We docked at the port of Zhanggang near Beijing. I was fascinated with all the sights and the culture. I traveled briefly through China and took several daguerreotypes of the harbor from my ship's deck. Almost broke, I worked on another steamship that took me briefly to Australia. With some money in my pocket, I toured around the country. I didn't take any daguerreotypes during my travels. That was a pity. My money was spent so quickly, I was again looking for another adventure. My next job aboard a steamship took me all the way to Santiago, Chile. During the warm weather, I walked and took trains across the Andes Mountains, finding work as I could. I finally settled in a small town called Puente del Inca in Argentina, signed on with the construction crew, and helped build tunnels for the Trans-Andean Railroad, which still exists today.
My final trip at sea was aboard the SS New York steamship that took me from Buenos Aires, Argentina to Ellis Island in New York. The year was 1911, and I had paid for a third-class ticket under the name of A. Einstein. At Ellis Island, they asked me my name and someone gave them my real name, Alexander Jackson. I thus became Alexander Jackson in the United States. I could not speak English at all, so it was a challenge to get around in New York City. After 2 weeks in America, I contracted typhoid fever and was unable to get help. Luckily, 2 nuns from a nearby Catholic hospital found me in the Bowery district, collapsed from fever. I've never been sicker. My hair turned white due to my high fever, and I was wrapped in rubber sheets with ice for several days. After my recovery, I stayed in New York for 2 more years working in machinist jobs. My wanderlust was not finished though. I traveled and worked in most of the 48 states and the territory of Alaska over the next 2 years, and in 1915 I worked as a machinist in several gravel pit operations in Pleasanton, California. A year later, I moved to nearby Livermore, California, and was head of facilities for the Livermore Sanitarium, a private psychiatric hospital catering to rich clients. It was there that I met the woman who cured my wanderlust. Effie was an occupational therapist at the sanitarium, and after dating, we married and moved to Alameda, California to continue our life together. And now you know the whole story.